delay, I would like to Olena.
Good evening, everyone. I don't know what time in California. In Paris, it's also evening. In all Ireland, it's also evening. I'm very happy to see you all. It's my fifth time that I deliver this workshop, but first time for this amount of Irish hosts. It was inspired by Irish hosts. And finally, we get a so huge audience, so huge amount of people who may be interested. Who are Ukrainians? Because 20 years ago, when I traveled, hardly anyone know about Ukraine. They ask, Shevchenko, that's your famous football player, or Yana Plechkova, those who were interested in sports and in swimming. And that was mostly all, Klitschko, the boxer, who is the mayor of Kiev right now. So right now, I'm very happy that there is a so big interest to Ukraine and to Ukrainian nation. And I'm very happy to start sharing my screen with you and start the presentation, which I adjust specially for you. Hope it will not be boring and you will receive some interesting facts and some pleasure listening to me. For the purpose of calmness, we ask you to switch off your mics. But you're welcome to ask your questions if they pop up during presentation. Write them in chat. Rachel will read them all after, and we will explore them deeply during Q&A session. So let's start. What we will talk about? We will talk about historical overview, modern Ukraine, reasons and influence of the war, cultural differences and similarities between Ukrainians and Irish. It's my personal observations and observation of my friends and colleagues. And also, if we have time, we will do small quiz with interesting facts about Ukraine, and then we will have Q&A session. So I hope you have questions, and you can also share your feedback about the presentation, how it was for you, what was interesting, what was less interesting. I'm always open for the constructive feedback. Of course, I find this information pretty useful for people. Of course, Ukrainians, it's a numerous community in Ireland. And me as a volunteer and Ukrainian activist, see the opportunity for our nation to show ourselves from its best side. And I hope to help my fellow countrymen to build a valid reputation in Ireland. So, historic overview. Let's start from the very ancient times. And through all the presentation, I would like you to focus on similarities between our cultures. I found a lot of them, so probably you will find them as well. One of the first civilizations that was found in the territory of Ukraine, it's a Tripilian civilization dated 4000 BC. And it's also called Cucuteni Tripilian civilization, and they could be the original ancestors of all Slavs. And Slavs were the largest European ethno-linguistic group geographically distributed through northern Eurasia, mainly inhabiting Central and Eastern Europe. What are the peculiarities of this civilization? First, I see something in common with ancient Irish civilization, because the main symbol was a solar symbol. People at that time, maybe in many civilizations, they worshipped sun, because sun was the source of energy. What's interesting, this civilization, they had female goddess, and they also worshipped female goddess. Another peculiarity of the civilization, they left us first proto-cities in Europe. So people from Terpillian civilization started to build their houses for and make kind of cities. So when houses surrounded by the furnace, or when people grouped together during 4000 BC. I think that what I saw in Ireland, also some of the ancient remainings dated 3000 BC, also have some solar signs. Another famous civilization in the territory of Ukraine, Scythian civilization. Scyths, they came from Greek language, named for the Iranian-speaking nomads of Ukrainian steppes, more on the south. And this civilization dated from 7 BC to 4th AD, and they called themselves Scots. And it's also interesting. Where is Scotland? Yeah, and we also have some people who call them Scotavod, because Scot mean cattle, Scotavod mean cattle minders, and they were great cattle minders. Also, Ukrainians are not direct descendants of Scythians, but we as a nation inherited some cultural peculiarities from Scyth culture. For example, sound fu, which pronounced like hv, which is not typical for other Slavic languages, and sound g. You see this little sign on top of this letter. It's typical, it's this sound and this letter is presented only in the Ukrainian, in the modern Ukrainian language. And it's interesting, when Ukraine became independent, this sound were placed back to the Ukrainian alphabet, because during Soviet times, Ukrainian alphabet was decreased, and Soviets, they took away this letter from Ukrainian alphabet, but now it's came back to us. Scythian culture was also very famous of its gold jewelries, and mostly for embossment, they used the animalistic symbols and animals. We have a big museum of Scythian gold in Kiev. And when I was a young girl, I had this badge of this animal. And for me, it's something remain in me, my childhood, because I remembered how I learned history from museums, from stories of my parents, and it's very dear for my heart. Therefore, I placed this picture on the bottom of the page. And also, these jewelries are still well popular in Ukraine, and animal signs are presented in ornaments of buildings in Kiev, Chernihiv, Pereyaslav, the old Kievan Rus cities. Let's come to Kiev. Kiev is the capital of Ukraine, but it's also a Slavic settlement. The century of East Slavic civilization, it's like its center, known from the 5th century. So the date of establishment of Kiev is 482nd year AD. Kiev reached its golden age as the central and as the center of Kievan Rus in 10th, 12th century, and it became very famous all over Europe, from Constantinople till countries where Vikings came from. If you see the photo on top, this is ladya. Ladya, it's an old vessel which were used by Vikings, Egyptians, and also Slavic people. And you see how differently, like how different elements of different civilizations can be present. Where is Egypt? Where Vikings? And where Kiev? Yes, but at the same time, all these people, they use the same shape of vessels. So we have a legend that there were three brothers, Kishek and Harif, and their sister Libit, who came through the Dnieper River, which one of the biggest rivers in Ukraine. They came by Ladya, and Ki, the eldest brother, established the city. And the city was named after him. We have two hills, Shikavitsa and Harivitsa, which currently in Kiev, and we also have the river Libit, which was very wide, and before even vessels go across it, but now it goes only in pipes. What we can else tell about Kiev? It was the commercial center of the great trade route between Scandinavian and Constantinople, current Turkey. Kiev was a tributary of Khazars until it captured by Varangians in mid-9th century, and under Varangians' rule, the city became a real capital of Kiev Rus, and it was one of the first Eastern Slavic states, well known across the whole Europe. So you see that in the territory of Ukraine, civilization was flourishing even before 10th century of our millennium. I place this funny picture with a negative smile in the middle because of the slogans written behind. This is like Kiev religions building, yeah, churches and cathedrals, and it is written that Kiev is the mother of Russian cities. And then with the small letters, then what Ukrainians are doing there. And here it's Ukrainians are not named as a nation Ukrainians, but as Khachli. Khachli is a humiliating name which Russians invented because of the hairstyle of Ukrainian Kazakhs. And we will talk about Kazakhs later, but I give you a few keys during the presentation, which hopefully will unite a few puzzles, which hopefully will unite in one big picture about Ukraine. The very low, on the bottom of this page, there is our beautiful Sofia Kievskaya. It's one of the 100 World Wonders and the inheritance of UNESCO, built in 18th century, and it has very famous history. It was the monument of Kiev Rus culture and enlightenment, because from Kiev, it was a wave of enlightening going to all Europe. And later on, I will talk about one of the French queens who was originally from Kiev, and thanks to her, or to her inheritance, Sofia Kievskaya was not destroyed, because despite it was built in 11th century, during Soviet times, Soviets tried to destroy it. But thanks to the inheritance who lived in France, they said, if you don't want national scandal, don't do it. So we still have it. Rurik dynasty. This is the most long-lasting dynasty in Kiev Rus. According to the 12th century primary chronicle, the Rurik was a Varangian chiefsman of the Rus who gained control of, and these are all right now Russian cities, Lagada, and built in, he was responsible for building Novgorod, one of the biggest cities in Russia, in 862, and he was the founder of this empire of Rurik dynasty. And interesting that when we learned history in Soviet Union, I made in Soviet Union, I finished school during Soviet Union, we were learned that Rurik was one of the famous Russian dynasty. But if we see to the history, which was rewritten in Ukraine so many times that it's very hard to find what is true and what is imaginary, they came from Varygians. He came from Varygians, so he was one of the Vikings who, inheritance of Vikings who settled and made Kiev the capital of Kiev Rus. Rurikus ruled the Kievan Rus and its successor states, including Kingdom of Lithuania, Principality of Tver, Grand Duchy of Vladimir, Grand Duchy of Moscow, the Novgorod Republic, and the Tsardom of Russia until 17th century. Again, at school, we learned that Russian Empire started to increase its influence from the 13th century. We don't know how it was at that time. However, we understand that at that time, maybe 14th, 13th century, Moscow, it was only a grand duchy. What else we can say about Kiev Rus? Ukrainian history dated to the time of the Kievan Rus, and it's one of the most powerful civilization hub of medieval Europe. And I'll show you these coins, which were popular not only in Ukraine, and traders that they could use it in all other neighbor countries, because they were precious, they were made of silver. And Kiev was an important European cultural capital, and on the eve of a Mongol Tatar invasion in 2024, it was one of the biggest cities in Europe. Interesting that I would like to pay your attention to this person, Vladimir, and to this sign. Probably you know why I decided to show you. If not, you will learn about it later on. Well, I think that every nation have their famous women. One of our famous women was the Princess Olga. Even the writer George Martin, the author of Game of Thrones, was inspired by Olga's story and created character Kaiser, the best princess warrior. So, what was Olga famous for? She was the great helper for his husband, and his husband was once invited by Drevlyani, one of the tribes, Slavic tribes, and they invited him for negotiations, but they killed him. So Olga decided to take revenge. She was very beautiful. So after several years, Drevlyani sent delegation to her and say, would you like to become the wife of our head? And she said, okay, I will talk to you and I will accept your delegation, but first I'd like you to take banya. Banya, it's like sauna, but with a humid steam and with brooms. So when this delegation came inside, she fired it. So all delegation was fired. And using the same methods as Drevlyani used to his husband, she killed more than 5,000 Drevlyan people of Drevlyan tribes. All Kiev royalty supported her because Drevlyans took they always try to conquer that territory. And then she was invited after 10 or 15 years to Constantinople, and she was asked the leader, the king of Constantinople, to become his wife. And she was a very smart woman. She is the first who brought Christianity to the Kiev Rus. What she did, she said, okay, I will I will think about your proposal, but first, please baptize me. And she was baptized, and Constantinople was the center of Orthodox religion at that time, at Orthodox Christianity. And then she said, sorry, now you're my baptized father, I can't marry you anymore. So she was a great leader for the whole nation, and she was the first woman who was canonized and called equal to the apostles. And this is Vladimir. He was in the coin. He also called the Red Sun. Why? Because he was the one who unites different tribes of Slavics. And during his realm, it was very good, like it was the great time. Therefore, he called the great for the Kiev Rus. Vladimir consolidated the Rus realm, originally a follower of Slavic paganism. He converted Kiev Rus to Christianity in 1988 and Christianized the Kievan Rus and declared, and what's interesting about Vladimir, that he is the only saint who is declared as a saint in both Western Christianity and Eastern Orthodox Church. Another famous prince of Kiev Rus, Yaroslav. He was called Yaroslav the Wise because he really influenced across the whole Europe. All his children became princes or princesses in different European countries. And at his time were built this building, his monument, and this is Golden Gate. Golden Gate, it's despite it's made of wood, it were a gate. They were gates to Kiev. And why golden? Because people, traders who want to come inside Kiev, they should pay in gold. Yaroslav the Wise called the father-in-law of Europe. His children ruled Denmark, Norway, and Hungary. And his daughter Anna married the king of France, Henry I, and became a queen of France in 1051. Interesting, I saw the movie, historical movie about Anna. At that time, people in France, they didn't wash themselves and they smell awful. And Henry was a great warrior, but not very good husband to her. So what she did, the first thing that she did, she brought a big library from the Kievan Rus to Paris and also built banyas, or steam baths, which call like kind of steam baths in Paris. So the culture of washing were brought to France from Anna, the queen from the Kievan Rus. Danila. At Danila's time, it was the hard times already for Ukraine because it was a Tatar-Mongol eager which conquered, and after Vladimir time, Vladimir consolidated Kiev, and afterwards already his children and grandchildren, they were splitted. Therefore, Tatar-Mongolian eager could conquer most of territories of Ukraine, and Danila was the main successor of the Kievan Rus, and he was the ruler of Halitsko-Volhynsky Gallic-Volyn kingdom. It's mostly in the western part of Ukraine. And his main enemy was Mongol Empire, and he always tried to protect Ukraine from ego, their ego. We call it Tatar-Mongol ego. Interesting fact about Kiev and about Moscow. And also I give you this fact as a spoiler, because later on we will talk why it's important. It's just to notice your attention that there are 6.5 centuries difference between establishing Kiev and Kiev Rus and Moscow. And now, interesting fact about the coat of arms. You see, our trizub, the symbol of Ukraine, coat of arms, is taken from the ancient Kievan Ras coin. And this is a symbol of Kiev, Archangel Michael. Look at the coat of arms of Moscow. It's George the Victorious. Look at symbols on the coat of arms. You see he's George the Victorious killing the dragon. And this is the main, I used to work with archetypes, and this is the main archetype of Russia. What's interesting that Russians as nation, they always need to have the external enemy, because again, this is my, like, let's say, personal opinion, which I took from different sources. Russians, they, in their blood, they united only when they have external enemy, which they need to protect themselves, how it's called. And it's in their blood because it's in their coat of arms, because coat of arms is the symbol which represents the nation. And look at the Russian coat of arms, the two-headed eagle, and look at the symbol of the coin of Tatar-Mongol or Mongolian Empire. So one of the facts, which it's hardly can be proved right now, but it's one of the suppositions, assumptions that Russia widely inherited the cultural code of Mongol Empire. And now it's time to come back to Chakhalok, Chachol, if you remember, I mentioned this word before, and Kazakh. This is Kazakh. Kazakh is the military man, and the famous peculiarity of Kazakh was this piece of hair on the crown of the head. And because of this, Russian call Ukrainians Chakhli, because this piece of hair called Chakhalok. Kazakh from Turkish mean adventures. Also, after Tatar-Mongol, some of territories of Ukraine, more south, were conquered by Turks. Therefore, we have a big mixture of bloods: Turkish, Mongolians, Varygians, Polish, Austrian, and so forth, and so like there is a big list. Cossack means adventurer or free man, and this characterizes the spirit of Cossacks. Banding together for mutual protection, starting from 15th century, the Cossacks by the mid of 16th century had developed the military organization of the peculiarity. They were like the first democratic organization in Europe. They had General Assembly, Rada, and it was the supreme authority, and they elected officers, including the commander-in-chief or hetman. And Ukrainian Kazakhs used to be one of the strongest army in Europe, helping Ukrainian countries to free from the remains of Tatar-Mongolian invasion. And also interesting that at certain period of time, like Swiss army protecting Vatican's right now, Cossacks were also invited to protect certain parts of Europe. And this is something which maybe will touch your heart, because you also were, but you were mostly under your big brother, and we have a lot of, let's say, empires which try to conquer Ukraine. We say that Ukraine is like a wonderful, beautiful woman. Everyone wants to be with her, but no one wants to get married. And why? Because she wants to be independent. So the culture of the Kiev Rus and Galician Volyn Principality became the basis of Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, the first prototype of European Union, where different nations existed based on the democratic principles: Poles, Lithuanians, Ukrainian, and Belarusians. In 19th, 18th century, Ukraine was the part mostly of two empires, Austro-Hungary and Russian Empire. And in 20th century, as you know, we became part of the USSR. I especially put the accent on this article. For 300 years, Ukraine was under different empires, and during these 300 years, Ukrainians never stopped fighting for their freedom and independence. It was very hard to protect Ukrainian culture, Ukrainian nation, because it was cut off mostly by the Russian Empire. Nevertheless, being a part of the first Russian Empire and then USSR, it's left strong imprint on Ukrainian society, but it wasn't killed. Ukrainians were not killed as a nation. First time in the history, in, let's say, more or less modern history of this century, of this, not of this century, but of the last 300 years, Ukraine became independent in last century. It became after, when Russian Empire was divided into different parts and Soviet Union was shaped, Ukrainians shaped the Ukrainian People's Republic or Ukrainian National Republic. And Ukrainian territory after the collapse of Russian Empire followed Russian Revolution, and afterwards, after the First World War, when it was ended, this a very short period of time, you see, only for 3 years, but it was an independent state. And the crowning of the empires had a great effect on the Ukrainian nationalistic movement. And in short period of 6 years, but mostly main 3 years, and then 3 years of total self-protection, Ukrainian government sprang up. And this guy, this man is the first president, Grushevsky. Grushevsky was one of the main historians of Ukraine. And thanks to him, we know Ukrainian history, because it was rewritten by the Russian Empire and then by Soviets. And look at the symbol of coat of art of Ukrainian Republic. You see this trident, the symbol of Ukraine. So, how Ukraine moved from the USSR to freedom? As you may know from your Ukrainian guests, we also have our own Holodomor, or this a period, it's kind of genocide against the Ukrainians. It's what the famine. It was the Great Famine, but it was artificially made for Ukrainians. At that time, Soviet regime, they tried to expand. What they did, they took all the grain, and Ukraine has the best soil in the world. During World War II, Nazis, they took Ukrainian soil, put to the wagons and sent to Germany. Because if you put a stick, it will grow in Ukraine. The soil is very fruitful. It's very like black and oily. So it's very fruitful for plants. And during 30th and 33rd year, there were from 3.5 to 5 million people who were killed by Soviet regime, mostly in Ukraine. What they did, they took this grain, either they burnt it or they sent it to America in exchange of machinery, because it was a time of industrialization. World War II in Soviet Union, it was called Great Patriotic War. So in Soviet, all the information was deformated. There were from 8 to 14 million Ukrainians killed, and only 6 million were identified. So Ukrainians became like flesh who were sent to the front line. And we also have our local genocide against Jewish people, more than 100,000 people, this amount of people right now in Ireland. In 1943, Nazis, they killed near 100,000 Jewish people, and not only Jewish. And history now trying to understand where it's done by Nazis or it was also done by the Soviets. Another very negative fact of our history, it's explosion in Chernobyl nuclear plant. I was at that time a child. I was sent to Russia to my relatives to Volgograd, and I'm 47 and some of my classmates already died. So this is the influence of Chernobyl nuclear power plant explosion. Okay, let's come to modern Ukraine. How we became independent. When Soviet Union was collapsed, in 24th of August, Ukraine separated from the USSR and became an independent sovereign state. Throughout the 33 years that independent Ukraine has existed, Russia have never given up attempts to win it back. First with soft power, as we know, and then after attempts to conquer the nation with the soft power failed, it switched to the force of arms. And prior to the invasion of eastern regions were more pro-Russian, western regions more pro-Ukrainian and pro-Western. That's why Russia started its invasion in 2014. But people who lived in Crimea, who was annexed in 2014, they shouted, hey, look at us, because Russian propaganda was so strong, more than for 18 years. But to tell the truth, and I'm as a Ukrainian can say that I was one of these people who were blind. People, those who lived in Donetsk, Lugansk regions, they knew that the war was near, but we didn't really believe them. This is how we live. We live thinking, oh, it's somewhere there. If it's not touching ourselves, we are not involved. And that was maybe the mistake of our nation, that we didn't pay attention at proper time. It's the same with cancer. If you caught it in the early stages, it's much more easier to be cured. Unfortunately, we are in where we are right now. Interesting fact that in the beginning, when Ukraine was independent, it was called the Ukraine as the inheritance of the Soviet Union. So it's not correct, just for you. We say just Ukraine. And interesting that all these peculiarities with letter G and Ukraine without the article were brought from Canada, because in Canada there is the biggest diaspora, Ukrainian diaspora, and they tried to cultivate and to keep Ukrainian culture and Ukrainian literacy. So how looked like modern Ukraine before the war? It's a pretty big country, one of the biggest in Europe. More than 600,000 kilometers, with the 43 million of population. Now it's near 36 plus minus. This is very doubtful number. Density approximately, they say a little bit lower than Ireland. 60 people per square meter, in Ireland 73, and Ukraine is a unitary state with 3 levels of administration divisions: regions, reigns, and hromats. And Ukraine is a unitary multi-party republic with a single legislative house, Верховна Rada. If you heard this word before, when Ukraine first became independent in the last century, they also have Rada. So this is the language map of Ukraine. Language question is so sensitive among Ukrainians. It's very sensitive. According to the census in 2001, 67% of Ukrainian population treated Ukrainian as a native language. However, in Kiev, most of people at that time spoke Russian, but most people were bilingual. And still, this is our unique proposition, an excellent proposition, how I say. We are most bilingual. Russians treat Ukrainian language as a dialect and call it Malorossia, the small Russia. But it's interesting that Russian language has near 115,000 words plus minus, and Ukrainian has more than 250,000 words. And if we take old dialect, then more than 400,000 dialects and old-fashioned words. Just for comparison, English has 500,000 and Greece 5 million. This is how look the map. Blue, these were mostly Russian-speaking regions. Kharkiv, Dnipropetrovsk, Zaporozhye was mixed, and that part were mostly speaks Ukrainian. Why this is a sensitive question? Because right now, many people still speak Russian in their families. And you know, if you were learned in Russian, your mother talked to you in Russian, and then you obliged to switch to Ukrainian, it's not something that goes from heart. So I know many people who always spoke Russian. I was one of them, but last year I switched to Ukrainian. Yes, my Ukrainian not as perfect as Russian, because I still use some Russian words, but now is the best time when we can switch to Ukrainian. And I make currently research, and I realize that Ukrainian is more melodic, and each language it activates different centers. So when we speak Ukrainian, it calms down our mind. I wrote in some researches, the same as Sanskrit. So how current map of Ukraine looks like? In pink, dark pink, you see the regions that were occupied by Russians. 98% of Lugansk was occupied before, Donetsk, Lugansk, and Crimea. But now there is some more additions to the map. Zaporozhye region, which is the big energy plant in Zaporozhye. Kherson region, it's where there was plant which was destroyed near Kherson by Russians in Kakhovka. And Kharkiv, the second biggest city in Kiev, in Ukraine, 2% of Kharkiv region is occupied also by Russians. So, are you interested in reasons and influence of the war? Why did Russia invade Ukraine? And now I hope all the spoilers will make a more clear and more full picture. First, as I assume, this appropriation of history. Without Ukraine, Russia can't claim to be a full-fledged successor of the Kiev Rus. It's interesting because for Russians, as for people, they still have imperialistic mentality. Yes, of course, modern generation, it's much more prominent. There were many people who are against, but more than 65%, they support Putin's regime. So what we can say that people have learned helplessness. And for them, for people who still have imperialistic way of thinking, it's very important to have long-term history. And this history is not Russian, it's Ukrainian. Russia isn't simply trying to conquer a part of Ukrainian territory, but it wants eliminate Ukrainian national identity, because it's like, you know, the dust in the air for them. We believe that they love us so much. There is one of the, you know, assumptions that they love us so much that they want to have us. But Ukrainians by spirit are very independent nation. So when the war started, I have a lot of relatives from Russia. And when my mom started to send real videos, which she made with destroyed houses, my relatives with whom I know for 47 years, 45 years, they say, it's you Nazis, it's you occupied yourself. To tell the truth, me personally, I was really shocked. That's how I learned. And then when I start to explore this topic, I understand that many Ukrainians experience the same. Therefore, I had an interview I gave for very nice Russian journalist who studies in Galway University. And I openly told him that, you know, for some Ukrainians, despite they speak Russian accent, Russian with a Russian accent is still very painful to hear right now. And this is one of the psychological peculiarity which we have to accept. Also, I have some talks with Ukrainians. And when I publish the information about this workshop in my LinkedIn, I receive a few comments like, could you ask, please, Irish people not to ask how you are and to ask us about the war, and that it's so hard for us. It's a few people, near 10 people shared with me. I also helped Red Cross made some focus groups of Ukrainians who live in host families. And I realized that if people want, they will share by themselves. But I know that Irish people, and we'll talk about it later, very hospitable. But please, but you already may know this, but if you're only starting to host Ukrainians, please consider this fact that it's national question of language and question of the war are very sensitive questions. Another reason, it's also natural, economic, and cultural resource. Ukrainian is very rich in terms of black soil, cultural fuel, and of course, Russia wants to use its natural resources. And it also could be a platform for the attacks, because Ukraine is in the edge of Eurasia, eastern part of Eurasia, and Central and Western Europe. Therefore, many Ukrainians say stay with Ukraine because we are protecting not only our country, we are protecting Western lifestyle and way of thinking. Again, this is very subjective. I don't pretend to be objective, but I share what I gather from different people as well. What are the influence of the war? Near 10% of population left. This number is very doubtful. I found from 8 million to 4 million, but many people came back because Ukrainians are not very well traveled nation. So many people came back despite its war and with their children as well. Right now, there are near 102,000 Ukrainians in Ireland, and it's 2% of population. So 10% of population left Ukraine, and 2% of Irish population is Ukraine. You see, Ukraine is a really big country. Mainly Ukrainians are in Germany, Poland, and from my perspective, Ireland is one of the countries that treats Ukrainians in the best possible way. Therefore, the percentage of Ukrainians is still increasing. Some countries already paying money to let Ukrainians go back. And Czech Republic, for example, they don't support Ukrainians, doesn't support Ukrainians anymore. Slovakia, so people live in these countries, and the population of Ukrainians decreased there. But in Ireland, I know about the crisis, and therefore I'm so happy to present for you, because we really value your generosity. Also interesting fact that according to the scientific approximation, 30% of people will not come back. At the beginning of the war, when I came in 2022 in spring, I talked to the Polish ambassador, and she said that don't think that people will come back. Even Polish is the biggest community. It's near 120,000. And she said that even during the COVID, still 80% left. Also, they were united and organized Ukrainians. We became more social oriented and self-organized, and volunteering started to explore and in the communities. And it's interesting that Russians hoped to conquer the Ukraine, and that Ukrainians would treat them with flowers that were Russian soldiers told. But they couldn't even believe. And maybe you heard from your Ukrainian hosts or hostess that Putin make a speech because he planned to conquer Ukraine in 3 days. But we know it's almost 2 years. And in fact, Ukrainians have awakened the Cossack spirit of freedom. And now, very interesting, from my perspective, very, very subjective, but I asked near 50 people when I prepared this presentation. So it's not only my personal subjective point of view, but it's something that I gather from our local community. Personality, how we're different and where we're similar. Ukrainians, you see, left side is Ukrainian flag, so it's a description of Ukrainians, and right side is Irish flag, and it's a description of how we see Irish. And please, in Q&A session, you're welcome to share what you find interesting, what you find wrong, maybe. Of course, we really try to understand more Irish as well. So we find that Ukrainian are more individualistic nation and loves freedom. Irish, we found more family-oriented and more patient. Maybe you pass through this 800 years of the UK Empire, the British Empire invasion, and we felt so deep patience in you. We are very talkative nations. We like these kitchen talks. We also find you as a very talkative nation, but you like small talks. Oops, someone is making lines in my presentation. Please stop doing it so I can see words. We are very social. We like holidays. We like to go to barbecue. Well, many families have dacha, summer cottages. We like home parties. We also find Irish people social, but you like more pubs and sports. We like kitchen talks. While your small talks more about weather, our kitchen talks from Soviet times, they're about politics. We always discussing, oh, that president is bad, that deputy is bad. And this is about attitude, which we talked about, which we will talk about later. Ukrainians are very well self-educated nation. From mid-age and young people and even elderly people, they want to be educated by themselves. They attend different courses, online groups. We found the same in Ireland, but what we see that mature people go to colleges and receive professional education, which is less typical. We receive more self-education. Volunteering. What we find in Ukraine, maybe because we need more. Ukrainians mostly support Ukrainians, while Irish volunteers support internationally. Young people, Ukrainian young people strive to be international, but it's before the war, it was really hard to go abroad. You should be best of the best to be invited to win a grant or scholarship. While what we see that for young people, it's so easy to go abroad, to spend a year in New Zealand, then in Australia, then go to the US for internship and something like this. And for us, it's wow. So our students are also learning how to be more international. Ukrainians very sincere, hospitable, but at the same time pragmatic. Agility is very typical for us, and we don't respect laws. As you see in our history, we will always have someone who ruled over. So all our tsars, they were just after the Kievan Rus, all the rulers, they were from different empires, but not locals. Therefore, Ukrainians try to avoid laws. So if you see this peculiarity in your guests, don't treat them hardly. Just realize that it's a part of the culture. Otherwise, it would be hard to survive. We saw in Ireland and we learn to respect laws. And it's really here I realized that laws can help. Because in Ukraine we have a joke. If there is a new law was issued, we need to find a way how to, adjust to it, how we say. And this is an interesting peculiarity. That you also were under the British Empire, but at the same time you respect laws. This is how differently the nations can react on the not similar, but little bit the same conditions. We also find Irish people very sincere and hospitable, but we also see that Irish take decisions step by step. However, it differs in terms of hosting, because, for example, the family who invited me, they write me just after the war and said, "We're welcome to host you. Despite you have 3 children and we have 4 children, come, and then we will decide." And we stayed with them 3 months, and it was very nice time when we learned Irish culture from inside. Also, what the difference I see between Ukrainians and Irish people? Ukrainians still have this habit of grabbing more material goods for future. Of course, we know that first Russians or Turkish or Austro-Hungary, someone will come and take. Therefore, Ukrainians learn how to make savings in terms of food, in terms of clothing even. So if you find this peculiarity in your guests, again, don't treat them too hard. It's also national peculiarity. In Irish, we find, because maybe you didn't have big influence of the World War II. I don't know, better, but we find that you have more sustainable consumption, and for the moment of time, you don't take more that you don't need, that you don't use. In Ukraine, the main let's say source of income mostly goes from the main source of income mostly goes from men, but main decisions are taken by women. We have an anecdote that when the Muslim person from Uzbekistan, for example, who wears this tubiteyka special hat, marries Ukrainian woman, he says, "My dear wife, if my tubiteyka stands to the left, you can do everything what you want with me. But if it stands to the right, don't even come to me." And she said, "My beloved husband, if my hands stand like this, I don't care how stands your tubiteyka." So Ukrainian women are pretty straightforward, can be straightforward, and decision makers. In Ireland, we find more partnership relations, and this is a question: who makes decisions? According to my investigations, I see that Irish women are very smart to take these decisions, but in the way that Irish men don't feel heard. I could be mistaken. Oh, maybe you heard from your guests about medical treatment. You know that some Ukrainians go back to Ukraine, even if it's dangerous there, to do some medical treatments as dental care, as surgeries, as gynecology. Of course, it's much more quick, everything in Ukraine. Everything is digitalized. If you have money and if you pay money, you can receive the same day all exams. While in Ireland, it took long-lasting period of time. Parenting style. Parenting style, what I find really different is parenting style. In Ukraine, children are given more freedom. For example, our children they go to school at 6 and they receive usually their first phone when they go to primary school. While here, you take more care about children. And we made cross-cultural dialogues in Galway Volunteer Centre with some parents, Irish parents, and they explained why you do this, why you have such care and protection for your children. Now, when we know the history, we understand it. But for us, for Ukrainians, it was like, how you can't leave the child under 12 by themselves. So we easily leave children maybe from 5 if we trust that they will not put something metal to the socket. And they don't, because we find our children pretty mature for their age and behavior. But at the same time, our parents a little bit shy for the children, could be shy for children behavior and say, don't, maybe you know, like we call it shikanye. It means that don't talk, don't show, don't take it. You know, they want their Ukrainians want to be their children like good looking, while we see that you are more free and natural with children. Again, this very like peculiarities. We find that Irish men more involved in parenting, no matter living together with their wives or partners or not, while in Ukraine, men are less involved in parenting, especially after divorce. It's a tendency. In Ukraine, females are more dependent on male and rely on male budget, while here we see parity, and female are more independent and self-sufficient. Do you know what is it, babushka? Babushka, it's an old lady, and babushki often take care about grandchildren, while here mature ladies take more care about their well-being. I don't say that Irish grandparents, they don't care about their children, but in Ukraine, they can be like grandparents can be like second parents. Because emergency economy, it make influence on people. People need more to work, to survive. There is less work-life balance in Ukraine. And when I facilitated dialogues and focus groups, I realized that many Ukrainians, even if they receive welfare, they say, we can't sit without work, we need to work, because it's in our blood. Ukrainians are pretty workaholics. Kids over care. So babushkas usually caring about kids in Ukraine. They feed them, they put warm clothes. And how overcare from our perspective look like in Ireland, you are very much considering risks and danger. And also one point that I'd like to touch is client service. We find it's very high in Ukraine. Again, it's influence that we're emergency economy. So we have to survive, we have to be very competitive. While here we see that client service is more easygoing, let's say. So I write here, maybe Ukrainians can assist. I mean that there are many Ukrainians working in hospitality sphere, and I hope it will have a positive influence in island client service in general. Well, and now it's time for quiz. Are you ready? I give you 1 minute. If you don't have a pen and paper, please take them, because I will ask you questions, and please, by intuition, choose which answer you think is the right one, and later on I will show you the results. Good? Let's go. A few interesting facts about the biggest country in Europe. How do you think, how many times did Ukraine win Eurovision? 1, 2, 3, or never? I will go pretty quickly, okay? What is the world's largest sunflower seed producer? China, Argentina, Russia, or Ukraine? Where is the deepest metro station in the world? The US, the UK, Ukraine, or North Korea? Haverla is the highest peak of Ukraine in the Carpathian Mountains. What is its height in kilometers? And I give you the also in feet. It's look beautiful, both during spring and during summer and during winter. Next question, what is the biggest plane in the world? Antonov An-225 Mriya Aerospace Line Super Guppy, Lockheed C5 Galaxy, Boeing 747. Choose your answer. How many neighboring countries has Ukraine? 3, 5, 7, or 8? What is the date when Kiev was established? 11 for 7, 841st, 842nd, 259 BC. How many national languages are in Ukraine? 25, 2, or 1? What is the meaning of the national coat of arms of Ukraine, the golden trident? Freedom, love, peace, or equality? And the last question, what is the name of the legendary English band who accompanied a vocal by the Ukrainian singer from the band Boombox to raise money to humanitarian relief for the people of Ukraine? Oasis, Led Zeppelin, The Cure, or Pink Floyd? Well, well, well. Are you ready for the answers? Let's go. Ukraine 3 times won Eurovision. So the same as Irish, we're pretty musical people. We like music. Ukraine, yes, is the biggest and the largest sunflower seed producer. And you may see that sunflower is one of the symbols of Ukraine. And this was a tricky question because the longest metro is in North Korea, and Kyiv metro station Arsenalna has 2 stepways, 2 escalators, and the second longest in the world. And this is how it looks like. And this our beautiful Haverla is 2,000 kilometers up under the sea. Yes, Ukrainian Antonov An-225 Mriya is the biggest plane in the world. And there are 7 neighboring countries: Moldova and Sea Azov, near Azov. It's Russia, Belarus, Black Sea to south, Moldova and Romania on southwest, Hungary, Slovakia, Poland on the west. Kiev was established in 282. There is only 1 national language in Ukraine, Ukrainian, but there are 20 languages spoken and dialects spoken in Ukraine. And according to the census, 67% of population speaks Ukrainian and 30% speaks Russian as their first language. This is the map. Yes, freedom. I repeated this word this word a few times during presentation, because freedom is very important for Ukrainian spirits. And now I would like to give you the right answer. This is Pink Floyd. It's interesting that the guitar player of Pink Floyd has son, and his son is married to Ukrainian woman, and he supported Ukraine. And right now I would like to make 5-minute break, and